right, there is Vice President Kamala Harris along with her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, speaking in front of the union crowd in Michigan. This is one of the many campaign stops that they're doing throughout battleground states throughout this week. Her thanking the unions and even saying if you aren't part of a union, you better thank folks who are in a union for all of the things that we're so used to in a typical workday. But this is, of course, pivotal, to be hitting the ground. And we know, on the Trump campaign side as well, Vance is following literally, step by step along the way to try to target these folks and really bring them over to their side. Yeah, we heard former President Trump earlier today holding a news conference at Mar-a-Lago. What's next for the Democrats? Well, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they'll be headed to Arizona later today and then on to Nevada as this tour of battleground states continues. So a lot going on. And also confirming just that September 10th debate between former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. We got a date finally as well. Yeah, a lot going on. A lot to get to in the business world as well. What a day on Wall Street. Feels like Monday was a long time ago, to be honest. But in terms of what the market is doing, it has been up and down. But today, finishing up a major rally on Wall Street. In fact, its best day in over a year. Some new Labor Department data helped with that, giving markets a boost, helping investors' confidence. You also have some big names, NVIDIA, Meta, Apple ticking up. After suffering some big losses on that tough day Monday, Disney was the only one tracking for a loss in that department after earnings showed its parks business is struggling. And speaking of the good labor news, fewer Americans filed for jobless benefits last week. The claims are still at an elevated level, but not at a troubling level. Claims hit 233,000 last week, fewer than the 240,000 analysts were expecting. Today's report marks the first since a very disappointing July jobs report that sent Wall Street spiraling. Yeah, and the average 30-year mortgage rate falling to its lowest level since May 2023. Freddie Mac says it is now 6.47%. That's down from 6.73% last week. Experts say the continued drop could inspire more potential home buyers to enter the market. Meanwhile, Redfin says 8 cities now boast markets valued at over $1 trillion. The new additions: Chicago, Phoenix, Washington, D.C., and Anaheim, California. All right, and we mentioned it was a big day on Wall Street with stocks surging. Yeah, amazing difference just a few days can make. The market continuing to rebound from its recent slide that began at the end of last week. All 3 major indexes finished way up. Take a look at this. The Dow closing the day up almost 700 points, was over 700 at one point. The S&P 500 ending up more than 2%, and the NASDAQ ended trading up nearly 3%. Jay Zagorski is with us now. He's a clinical associate professor of markets, public policy, and law in Boston University's Business School. Jay, it feels like it's been a roller coaster ride. We've been taking the highs, of course, but what explains the market's jump today?
I'd lie to you if I could tell you exactly what explains today's ups and downs. Nobody knows what happens with ups and downs. But let me refer to you to first what I said last week on last Thursday. I said, don't panic, right? There's plenty of good news in the market. And yes, a number of people panicked on Friday and Monday. Markets went down, but then everybody sort of got a little bit of common sense and came back. And for what I tell many of my students, one of the most famous books about Wall Street is called A Random Walk Down Wall Street. It's a bit like a drunk. They know which direction they're going in, but they sort of weave up and down, up and down. And since the beginning of the year, since January 1st, the markets are still up. We're still up almost by 5% since the beginning of the year. That's not too bad. You expect some bumps along the way.
And Jay, I remember you sharing that on a more difficult day. I think it was either the end of last week or on Monday, talking about people should really look at the big picture moving forward. The markets today, they were up really from the opening bell. One thing we noticed, there was a spike at the same time that former President Trump was giving his news conference today. Then we saw stocks jump again as Vice President Harris was starting her campaign event that just finished in Detroit. Is there any connection there?
I don't think there's much connection, but one of the things that I saw in Donald Trump's speech was that he said, let's have 3 debates. Markets love information. When the presidential candidate says, I want to give more information about my policies, that's positive news for market participants because they know what to expect. Whether it's good news or bad news, knowing what's going to happen helps people. But let me focus on some of the good news. The Federal Reserve has been saying for the many, many months, we're trying to slow the economy down. And the economy's slowing down a little bit. Now the Federal Reserve says, okay, we've been raising interest rates to slow the economy down, and now we're thinking about cutting interest rates to speed the economy up. It's not like there's nobody at the controls, nobody at the wheel. There's people at the wheel who are following things very carefully. We had some wonderful news today about unemployment insurance claims. They're down. But if you look at unemployment insurance claims over the long term compared to a year ago, they're actually a little bit less today in August than they were in August a year ago, right? Interest rates, they're now coming down. More people are going to be able to afford houses. More people are going to be able to afford cars. And last Friday, the unemployment rate jumped from 4.1% to 4.3%. And let me tell you, that is wonderful news. And why is it wonderful news? Because the increase in the unemployment rate was because lots of people started searching. It wasn't because people lost their jobs, but it was because people suddenly got confident that they could find jobs, so they decided to enter the labor force. For me, that's great news. When people feel confident enough that they can find jobs, and that pushes the unemployment rate up.
So speaking of controls, because you mentioned that, and who's at the wheel, former President Trump weighed in on the Fed, and he said the president should have more of a say in its actions. Let's listen to what he said this afternoon.
The Federal Reserve is a very interesting thing, and it's sort of gotten it wrong a lot. And he's tending to be a little bit late on things. He gets a little bit too early and a little bit too late. I feel the president should have at least say in there. Yeah, I feel that strongly. I think that in my case, I made a lot of money. I was very successful, and I think I have a better instinct than, in many cases, people that would be on the Federal Reserve or the chairman.
All right, what are your thoughts on his take over the president's role in all this, and also the Fed's, reactivity, if you will, to the economy?
Well, Donald Trump's a real estate investor, and a real estate investor, he's highly leveraged, and he really wants interest rates to go down. And whenever time interest rates go down, he owes less money on all the real estate that he's purchased. So I'm not really sure that he's a disinterested party. Should the president have a little bit more control? In my opinion, no. You look around the world, there's many countries where either the president or the prime minister actually tells the central bank what to do. For example, in Turkey. And the results, they're not always very pretty.
Really good perspective there. Jay Zagorski with Boston University's Business School. Great to have you as always. Thank you.
Great being on the show again.
The U.S. Supreme Court made its biggest decision on homelessness in decades earlier this summer.
Yeah, 6-3 decision. The justices ruling that cities could ban people from sleeping and camping in public spaces. The decision was a win for the small city of Grants Pass, Oregon, which brought the case to the Supreme Court. The city, as well as dozens of others, wanted more enforcement power to deal with the high rates of homelessness. Homeless advocates said the decision wouldn't solve the big issue and would only complicate things.
Now, just yesterday, the city of Grants Pass voted on a new plan to tackle homelessness. National correspondent Vanessa Mashania is live in Western Washington with more. And Vanessa, you've been following this story for months. What did the city decide?
Yeah, after a 2.5-hour-long meeting last night, the city council unanimously decided on a new plan that would designate camping areas for people to go to for a limited time. So here's what the plan says. So plan is to designate 4 spots for camping in Grants Pass, and in 3 spots, camping is allowed for only 24 hours before a person must move on to one of those, to a new spot. But one of those spots, they can remain for 96 hours. But any other person camping on public property that is not designated will be given 72 hours notice to move as per Oregon state law. If they do not, they will be fined $50. You know, this vote happened after passionate public comment. Some thought that this was being too lenient on unhoused people. Others thought that, this was not a good plan because it doesn't add any more housing. But the city council said, hey, this isn't perfect, but they are quite confident that they're at least striking a good balance and a starting point, guys.
And Vanessa, this isn't the only community redoing its approach to homeless encampments since this ruling. What else are you seeing across the country? Vanessa Mashania for us live in Western Washington. Vanessa, thank you. Still ahead on Main and Wall, the U.S. has seen more than $12 billion weather disasters this year alone. So how can you prepare? We'll examine umbrella insurance and why these policies can help when other policies don't cut it.
And in today's Black Business Month focus, we'll look at why businesses of color pay hundreds of thousands of dollars more just to get off the ground, the difference in startup costs, and what entrepreneurs should know.
August is Black Business Month. The U.S. Census Bureau says there are more than 161,000 Black-owned businesses.
And those businesses bring in over $183 billion to the U.S. economy each year. Now, despite this revenue, Black-owned businesses made up only 3% of all U.S. business in 2021. That's according to Pew Research data. Investment firm 1863 Ventures explored the disparities between minority and white-owned startups, and its research found that to successfully execute a business, it costs Black and Latino entrepreneurs at least $250,000 more than their white peers.
Let's bring in Melissa Bradley. She is the founder and general partner at 1863 Ventures, the nonprofit behind this research. 1863 Ventures provides support and education for minority entrepreneurs and helps them build their businesses. Thank you for being here. That number, $250,000, why is it so much more expensive for Black companies to get started?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I think there's a couple of reasons we found in the research. One is that the reality of how you start a business, right, with your social capital, financial capital, intellectual capital, are really the drivers of expenses. And so we found that it's a minimum of $250,000 for a few reasons. One, Black founders are less likely to be accepted into some of these accelerators. Without that acceptance, they end up missing out on free credits, free counseling, free mentorship. What we then found is that when they go out and find their own mentors, there's a 4 to 7 times churn rate because you find that many professionals don't understand the business, don't understand the market, and so therefore they're continuously trying to find people who can legitimately help them. The other piece that ties into that input is that we know that in order to start a business, right, you have to have access to people. And so we find that there's a high percentage of Black founders who are solopreneurs because they're unable to hire the talent that actually takes them on the trajectory. And when they do, they tend to over-index on 1099 employees, which costs a heck of a lot of money, oftentimes what they don't have. So we see that $250,000 are legal costs, coaching costs, startup costs that typically are covered in some kind of program that can support them. Not to mention, we know that factually that Black founders spend more when they borrow the same amount of money. Their interest rates are anywhere between 1.5% to 4% higher.
I mean, when you walk through all of those challenges, and obviously you're working with entrepreneurs to really be able to grow, to start and grow these businesses, what does that conversation look like after all the startup challenges to go ahead and scale?
So there's probably 3 trends in that conversation. One is, are you really ready? And if not, it is not a failure if you back out and actually go get a job. So we encourage people to make sure they're taking on this entrepreneurial journey and they can afford it. We found that too often we have folks that are spending an inordinate amount of money to keep their businesses afloat. The second thing is that we realize that there are founders out there who are in sectors where there is no growth activity. We find that founders oftentimes are being able to start businesses that are right in their backyard, but they don't automatically translate to growth opportunities.
I know your organization has a goal of generating $100 billion in minority-owned business wealth and economic power. How's that effort going?
It's going well. I think it's a learning curve for us in terms of making sure, one, that we need to make sure the businesses are stable. So we have a family of funds that actually invest in businesses through debt and equity capital. The second thing is we know that they actually have to be able to create jobs to grow their businesses. We're proud that over the last 5 years, we've created over 3,000 new jobs within our businesses. And then we know that they have to understand how to actually run a business. There is a big difference between being a founder and CEO. So we have trained over 5,000 founders in terms of what does it mean to actually grow and scale a business. So we are extremely optimistic. Last year, our founders generated over $380 million in new revenue for themselves and for their communities.
Wow. All right, I have to squeeze in this last question. One-liner from you. What is something you wish more aspiring Black entrepreneurs knew?
Managing their finances, personally and professionally.
There it is. Melissa Bradley, founder and general partner at 1863 Ventures. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. We appreciate it. And folks, we'll be right back.
Developing now, new Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg already made a big change, and it's just his first day.
Yeah, he's decided to work out of the company's Seattle office to help restore trust. Ortberg says he'll talk with employees and review safety and quality plans on the factory floor. He has similar visits planned at other Boeing plants. The new CEO's goal is to reestablish the company's reputation and earn back the trust of regulators, airlines, and the public. The company's quality control issues have resulted in 2 fatal crashes, terrifying incidents, and some deep losses.
Thank you for joining us. For the audience leaving us right now, your local programming is up next.
And check us out on scripsnews.com or any of these platforms. If you're staying with us, there's more news headed your way on Main and Wall, including shortages of popular drugs for obesity and diabetes are starting to improve, but some brands are still seeing supply issues. We'll examine why and where people are turning now.
Plus, getting FEMA aid after a disaster has been a bigger struggle than expected for some families. What a Scripps News investigation found about the problems with the process. We'll be right back. You're watching Main and Wall on Scripps News.